Welcome to this PinvoiceR training session. In this session we're going to have a look at the new employee screen. So basically it's a change to the layout and some of the functionality. The old one is still available, and in fact for a while we've had the new one available in preview, so many people are probably using it already. But basically what I want to do is just to run through the layout and so you can understand what each section does and how you can use it, and then some of the more detailed things such as how to do deductions, etc. We'll do in separate videos. We'll also do a separate video to run through the New Zealand employee screen. Obviously a lot of things are quite the same, but there are many things that are quite different from a New Zealand point of view. So when I've searched on somebody, and obviously I'm in a test database, when you click on their name, you'll now bring up their employee record that will look like this. So it's reasonably straightforward. So we've got obviously personal details, an area that will show things such as tax details, banking, superannuation, and then other areas which we'll come into in a second. But in terms of some of the functionality here, so if I'm looking at tax, in this case I've used a test one that will show as valid. But if somebody had an incorrect tax file number, so if the algorithm that validates the tax file numbers doesn't see it as being a correct one, it will show as a red X. And obviously if they don't have bank details and that kind of stuff, it will highlight that information, etc. where needed. You can also see, if I just go down to system settings, so many of our clients have multiple entities, so they 5, 6, 7 or more businesses that they run from the same PinvoiceR database. And in many of those cases, an employee might work across a few of those entities. So we've made it easier for you to see, imagine this particular record had multiple people, the same person but multiple records. You can see which one you're looking at for which particular entity, and obviously the default division. Other thing to note, obviously we've got their PinvoiceR ID, which is also we call their employee ID, and obviously all of our clients tend to use a front-end system, Recruit Online predominantly, and you'll get the external employee ID sent through there. So that's whatever links up to the Recruit Online record and vice versa. And if there was another system, and some clients do have other systems for other particular functionality in a payroll sense, or they need to track, then you can store those additional IDs against that. But the thing to know about these two, we also show them at the top, just in case you're ever wanting to quickly see what the IDs of both their PinvoiceR record and their, let's say, Recruit Online record, would be those IDs there. Just moving across the screen, this part here is reasonably straightforward. We've got an area for a sticky note. So there's a difference between what we call a sticky note and then the notes section. The sticky note is, you just whatever you want somebody to see when they come to this record. So it's like a one note. It's got nothing to do with when you did it or the date or who made the note, etc. So you'd put in whatever the note is, and hit save, and that would sit there until it's either edited or deleted or whatever. For day-to-day notes, and again it depends on whether you're using this, you would make a note, etc., add that note, and it will time, date, stamp it, and show you who this is, the test user, and these are the notes and when it was done. So it's reasonably straightforward. And obviously, in doing that, and I'll just refresh so we get rid of that success message, you will see that there. Other things, if, and this particular record or test record is a casual, so unlikely to have leave balances, but you would see those on this front screen here. In terms of editing information on here, again, most of this information is going to come through an onboarding process, but if you need to edit it, you would click on Edit, and then it will pop up the screen here. Now, the thing to note is that some of the information is mandatory, so as you're setting up a record, so for example, if the date of birth wasn't in there, it will force you to put a date of birth in there, and generally that's not an issue because that's, again, mandatory when somebody's onboarding, and some of it is, ideally needed, so it will be like just a warning when you go to edit and that sort of stuff. But each of those things, these areas, expand and contract depending on what you want to edit and see on the screen, and they're reasonably straightforward. There is a section for custom fields, and again, different clients use this in different areas, but they're sort of stuck down the bottom here over there. When you save it or apply changes, as I'm going to here, it'll go through an update, obviously, with any changes you made, and we didn't make any changes in this particular thing. But it does also do some checks in the system, so again, it can be useful. In this case, it's obviously all test data, but it's just saying, we've got multiple people with the same email address. So as I said, it's test data, so that's straightforward, and multiple IDs. So again, not something that's going to stop edit, but just give you a bit of information about it. In terms of deductions, I'll do a completely separate thing about deductions, but deductions sit in here, and you can see, you can obviously add a new deduction or add a new addition, and also handle your salary sacrifice for superannuation in here. And similarly, you'll be able to see, what are active here when they're set up, and any history of any deductions that have been made through payroll events and that sort of stuff. And similarly, if you want to managing the deduction bank accounts, you'll see that is here, and that's to do with where you're deducting the money to. But again, we'll do a separate video on that. Documents, very straightforward. So these would be example ones of an onboarding process maybe, and then maybe something's been uploaded and saved against the file. And then obviously, as we talked about with notes, you've got notes that you can make in here. In terms of other information, so things like, how do I see a person's pay slips, etc., or transactions, etc., they're all sitting under here now. So here, if I want to see pay slips, I click on that, or GL report, etc. So again, same functionality that always has been, but they just have them all listed on here. So if there's something you can't find with the layout, you would click over here to see it here. So that's reasonably straightforward. A couple of other functions that sit from here. So imagine our friend here is now finished up, and we want to archive, make them inactive. You can do that from the screen here, so deactivate them. You then forces you to pick a particular finish date, and then you would deactivate them like that. And similarly, a process where, and again, this is test information, but you might have a scenario where you want this particular record only visible to those who can see internal staff, be it casual or permanent. If I wanted to switch that, I could switch that person, and now they're internal. The logon I'm using can see both internal and external, or unhired as we call them. So it doesn't make any difference, but if I only had access to unhired and not internal, I would no longer be able to see the employee record for that particular person. So as I said, I hope that all makes sense. It's a reasonably straightforward layout, but again, we have also left somewhat hidden, but if you want to use the old one for a period of time, you can access that in there.